My name is Carrie Gray. I am a proud board member of this incredible organization, Black Feminist Futures. Yes. I am also a loud, out loud, Black disabled woman. Where are my disabled baddies at? Where are the people with scars? Where are the people who got things going on? We love you. We love you here. I'm so excited for the plenary that we have today. I'll be serving as your MC. I have a few announcements as we're getting ready and prepared for some incredible conversation about one of my favorite words ever, hope. But as we get into that, first thing, where the BFF members at? Where my crew? Where my squad? I see you. If you don't know, tonight we were going to have a BFF members kickback. We're going to be turning up. We're going to be having a good time. Okay, what's your karaoke song of choice? Shout it out to me real quick. What you singing? Yes. I see you. We're going to have a good time. If you are not a BFF member, I want to invite you into the family. We need you to join us in this movement that we are building around Black feminism. What I love about this organization is that they do so much to support Black women, girls, gender expansive folks. They do so much to blend a marriage between disability justice and Black feminism. How many of y'all know that disability justice is not the optional minor to Black feminism? That is the type of work that we do in this organization. So I want to invite you to join us. It is not too late to be a part of our family as we build and everything together. How have y'all sessions been so far? They've been doing okay? Yes. What are some of the sessions that you've been to so far? Shout it out to me real quick. Let me know. Yes, politics, BDSM, a lot of different stuff. Amazing work is going on. I love to hear it. I love to see it. Well, make sure that we have a whole nother day tomorrow. Come back, learn, grow, connect with those around you. It's going to be amazing. Okay, so I have a couple of announcements for you. Are you trying to win a Teffy bag? Did I say that right? I'm always looking at Paris. Yes, for my ladies who love a little fashion, for my people who love a little fashion, you can win that by attending the homecoming dance tomorrow evening. We're going to be turning up, and everyone will receive one raffle ticket, but you can increase your chances by donating to the organization, right? For each donation that you make, you will receive an extra raffle ticket. So make sure to tune in and get that going. Third place for the raffle will receive a Get Free banner. Second place receives a book bundle. Have y'all seen those incredible books that are out there? They are just beautiful. Oh my goodness. And then first place is definitely winning that bag. So check out the BFF merch shop. Do y'all know we got bonnets, we got socks, we got shirts, we got all the different things. So support us out in so many different ways. It's going to be open today through 7 p.m. and then it opens back up tomorrow from 8 to 10 a.m. and then tomorrow from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. So we're very, very excited. All right, are y'all ready to get this thing going? We about to get into it with some incredible people. At this time, I would love to invite our speakers to the stage. And as they are joining us, yes. Y'all already know what it is. Y'all already know. Yes. 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 Here for it. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Y'all, it's about to be fire. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Chanel Matthews. Period. So Chanel collaborates with social justice activists, organizations, and campaigns to inspire action and build narrative power for social justice and liberation. She is the communications director for Movement for Black Lives.
Gang, gang!
founder of Radical Communicators Network, RadComs, a global community of practice for social movement communicators workers, and former recruiter for Resistance Narrative at the New School. So many things. So many things. But you know what? I'm going to stop taking up space. I'm going to hand it over to Chanel, and let's do this.
Thank you, Carrie. Y'all give it up for Carrie. And good afternoon, everyone. And a special good afternoon to Ms. Paris Hatcher, feminist thinker, strategist, baddie. This is a beautiful space that you and the BFF team have created for us, and we are so grateful. It's as if the outside world briefly fades, and as we are enclosed and encircled in Black feminist peoples and possibilities, the beloved Mary Hook says that we must be willing to be transformed in the service of the work. Thank you, Paris and the BFF team, for building this portal through which transformation seems not only possible, but inevitable. We appreciate you. As we all know and feel right now, Black feminists are facing great uncertainty. Fascist forces reject and attempt to erase 20th century Black feminist advancements by banning books and curricula that explain the workings of race, class, gender, sexuality, and power in our society. The same forces enact legislation that criminalize and protesters while casting protesters as violent radicals to seize power in local communities. They are charged as domestic terrorists, and harsh penalties are imposed upon them to send a chilling effect throughout the movement. The right wing is capturing judicial and legislative institutions, which determine the policies and practices by which we live our lives. Transgender people's freedoms, rights, and healthcare access are being violently stripped away. Forced birth, the climate crisis, plus the rent is too damn high. Fascism thrives on control of our stories, identities, and bodies. It is supported by divide and conquer narratives that pit communities against each other and make us believe that there is insufficient space for all of us. It isolates us and our power, and it is not just happening in the US, but globally. Oppressive forces are organizing their people. Indeed, there is a growing anti-abortion coalition agitated by a new generation of anti-abortion leaders who call themselves the post-Roe generation. They're uncompromising in their vision for a post-Roe society, unafraid of short-term losses for long-term gain, and who laugh in the face of public opinions and critique. MAGA, Trumpian Republicans exploit people's fears of losing their station and status by scapegoating Black communities, immigrants, trans kids, and pregnant people. They cheer on white supremacist factions who, armed with torches and xenophobic ideologies, fight diligently to hold on to power by destroying democracy and all those who support it. Perhaps the most dangerous are centrists and liberals who in one breath say Black Lives Matter and in another espouse support for the very institutions that harm us, including the police, prisons, and the family regulation system, as well as detention centers. These groups' frameworks and power-building efforts create a network of attacks and opportunities for movement workers, Black feminist organizers, lawyers, activists to tackle. We know that the rights of Black women, non-binary, and trans people and the progression or the backsliding of democracy are deeply interconnected. Under fascist ideologies and policymaking, some people get to be fully autonomous and self-determined while others do not. And as a result, many of our lives become smaller, less predictable, and more dangerous. These attacks have not gone unchallenged, however. For example, in 2020, the movement for Black Lives, Black Visions, and many abolitionist formations brought global attention to abolitionist arguments that the only way to prevent deaths such as George Floyd's and Breonna Taylor's is to take power and funding away from the police. In Minneapolis, thanks to the Yes on 2 coalition, when asked if they would remove the police department from a city charter and replace it with the Department of Public Safety, 44% of Minneapolis voters said yes. That is a win. New survey research led by M4BL and the Black feminist scholar Kathy Cohen revealed that 1 in 3 Black people aged 18 to 66 believe the police should be defunded, and nearly 40% strongly support investing in solutions that do not rely on incarceration. Also, when COVID-19 emerged and work norms quickly changed for millions of Americans, disability justice advocates took advantage of that political disruption to proliferate messages that weakened dominant narratives about normative work culture, which privileges people without disabilities. They poked holes in and delegitimized ableist arguments by illustrating how quickly companies pivoted to remote work policies and practices when profits were threatened and compared to the slow or non-response when disabled people made the same demands. As Black feminist political scientist and Professor Diva Woodley reminds us, changing politics requires not merely a series of victories in discrete policy battles, but an ongoing struggle that shapes political meanings in the public sphere. Indeed, for political challengers, that's us, who set out to transform policy, shifting the mainstream public discourse is the best and in most cases the only way to achieve lasting change. Just 50 years ago, people did not believe that sexual violence was connected to a person's gender. And in the 2010s, we saw a global movement against sexual violence take new shape. Our movements also established permanency in pop culture, public discourse, shaping a generation's understanding of modern civil rights and Black freedom through television and music and books and fashion. We do not forsake any arena where our ideas must be. Building political and cultural power is part of the mandate. Although our opposition would never admit it, we are powerful. Their motives to conceal knowledge that undermines a white supremacist ideology and agenda is an effort to defang our movements, our progressive movements, our leftist movements, whose organizing yielded real material wins on racial, gender, sexuality, disability justice, and police reform in the 2010s and beyond. We practice intersectional feminism by making the invisible visible and striving to abolish patriarchal violence. Radical Black feminist frameworks, politics, and give us a commitment to abolitionist practices and guide our daily praxis. In our lives and work, we aspire to a Black queer feminist framework, organizing in communities nationwide to not only abolish state-sanctioned violence and patriarchal violence, but to guarantee that our movements are intersectional, inclusive, and rooted in Black queer feminist lenses, which Charlene Carruthers defines as Black feminist and LGBTQ traditions and knowledge through which people and groups seek to bring their full selves into the process of dismantling systems. Today, I'm joined by a remarkable panel of Black feminist thinkers, organizers, and builders. Tia Oso, a transformational organizer specializing in cultural and social change initiatives. Tarana Burke, an activist, advocate, and author who focuses on anti-sexual violence and racial justice efforts. Oriakụ Njoku, a Nigerian activist and the executive director of the National Network of Abortion Funds. And Jahan Giran, an indigenous feminist painter, writer, and organizer who focuses on environmental justice issues, among others. Our panelists will contextualize our challenges as well as offer remedies and solutions that are keeping them hopeful for the necessary work ahead. Please give them all a warm Black feminist welcome. All right, Oriakụ, I would love to start with you today. And I welcome other panelists to chime in on this question. We are 2 weeks shy of the first anniversary of Dobbs v. Jackson, the Supreme Court ruling overturning 50 years of federal legal precedent and ending the constitutional right to abortion, which made the United States one of only 3 countries to do that in the last century. For some, this move reflected Trump's impact on the federal judiciary. For others, it reflected a growing anti-abortion coalition, a spectrum of people who believe the rights of fetuses should outweigh the rights of living, breathing, pregnant people. Oriakụ, how did we get here? And if the reproductive movement had practiced the wisdom of Black feminist thinkers and organizers, how could we imagine things might be different?
Hey y'all. So when I got this question, how do we get here? I'm like, are we going back to like 1973 or 1492? Like where are we going with this? But I want to start with a little story as far as like how we got here and how I've been thinking about this. When I started doing reproductive justice work, it just, I could say it just happened, but I do feel like the universe was like placing me in the right place at the right time. And so it got to a point where I was like, there's something more to this story that I am not aware of. There's something more that is causing this situation that we're in to be causing all this fear and trauma, and there's something else to this. And my dad was always saying, you know, both of my parents are Nigerian, and Ibo Koino. Okay. So both of my parents are Nigerian. My dad would always say, never forget where you came from. And for me, that was something where I'm like, okay, never forget where I came from. My family's from Nigeria. I grew up here in the States. But I was having a conversation with one of my indigenous comrades, Koya, and she was talking about this idea of long memory. And, you know, this idea of long memory was not just like the recent past, but it really is back and back and back, like histories, generations, going back and remembering who we are and how we got to this place. And so one of the things that I keep thinking, especially when I'm like, how did we get here? I start to think about my ancestors, all of our ancestors, and I'm like, these are people of liberation. These are people who feel like we have a collective responsibility to care for one another, to show up for folks, to make sure that no matter what is going on, all of the material conditions are met so we can live and thrive and be the people that we want to be. And so 1492 happened, and no, I'm just kidding, here we are. No, but I'm thinking about this, I'm like, how do we get here? So the things that come to mind, first of all, is like this country is rooted in white supremacy, in cis-heteropatriarchy, in capitalism. I mean, we all know the things that are weaved into the fabric of what this country is. And so thinking about the anti-abortion movement, it really is to protect those things. It's to protect these levels of like structural oppression that we're experiencing every single day. And one of those ways is to really do the work around taking away our human right to bodily autonomy. You know, we can go back and think about even the history of gynecology and how the mothers of gynecology, we're not talking about the dude, but the mothers of gynecology, Anarcha, Lucy, Betsy, and all of these other women who were tested on, and the idea of gynecology built from our bodies, you know? This is also a way that we got here, is that our lives, our people, have been consistently trying to be erased from this dominant culture. I go to 1973 and start thinking about abortion and abortion access, and really thinking about how there were even in that fight, and since then, there have been so many compromises that have been made. There have been so many times where, you know, thinking about Black feminists who are like, yes, abortion and all of these other things that impact our lives every day. We cannot talk about just the legality of abortion. We actually have to talk about all of the things that influence the way that we're able to live and love and work and be present in this world. And so our voices were ignored. That's what it is. We were ignored. Our issues, our lives were an afterthought when we're just thinking about who we're trying to protect, which the reality is like they were trying to protect, you know, this palatable story around who has an abortion, which is young white girls, professional women. You know, these are all the people that they're thinking about, but they're not thinking about the folks in our communities who are marginalized, who are living in rural areas, poor folks, BIPOC folks. They're not thinking about that. And so, you know, it's felt like we've been coming against this thing where we're like, we know there's so much more than the legality of abortion access, and yet this is what we're focusing our energy on as a movement. And I won't say us, but the legacy organizations, white-led organizations, the focus was only on the legality of Roe. The legality of Roe never made abortion accessible. It never made abortion or ensured the availability of abortion. And it definitely didn't do anything to change the culture around how we talk about abortion here in the US as well. So there are lots of ways that we got here when we're thinking about like the country piece. And then we talk about the movement, and I mentioned the different compromises that come there. But I also think about like our individual responsibility. Like, how did we even allow ourselves as a people to get here? And I mean, white supremacy, our opposition, their strategy is working, unfortunately. Like, one of the things I think about is how strategic the opposition is. They have a playbook. They didn't stop. The things that we thought were unthinkable, they said, hold my purse. Let me show you what this is, you know? And so there's this persistence on honestly taking away our bodily autonomy, taking away our ability to self-determine what is best for ourselves, what is best for our families. And, you know, this idea of this post-real reality that a lot of folks were talking about as we're leading up to 2022, I mean, for folks who live in the South, that post-real reality was our reality and had been our reality for decades up until we got to this point. And so, you know, there's some people who are like, oh my God, what do we do, bro? But there are other people who is like, saw that parade coming down Main Street, and now that we're all here and recognize that this is an absolute shit show that we're in, how do we then change those conditions for what we want in our future, you know? I keep thinking about when Assata Shakur was like, we have nothing to lose but our chains. Like, well, we lost the thing that the movement was caring about. We lost it. So at this point, what do we have to lose, you know? And to me, what are the pieces, I'm always thinking like, what are the pieces in the chain that are holding us back from being as bold and visionary and going back to that long memory that we have of a liberatory people, you know? This is not our ancestors' wildest dreams. Like, this condition that we're at, it's not at all. And so there's so many ways that we got here, but even at that, I still have this like deep hope and belief that this is not permanent. This current state is a moment in our lives, and we will actually win. So.
I mean, should I go?
Yeah, please, yes.
100%. I was like everybody else, amening you everything you said. I'm also thinking about if folks had to listen, if, you know, there's so many things if folks had to listen. And I think in this room I can say if white folks had to listen, because they don't. I mean, y'all know if white folks had to listen. I think about Loretta Ross and Monica Simpson all the time saying Roe is the basement, Roe is the floor, right? Because it is absolutely the floor, and the difference between reproductive justice and this idea that they fought so hard to get Roe and then stopped. And that's really how we got here. That's because they stopped, and as soon as Roe was passed, there was this, I mean, there's all these other reasons too. And excuse me, because I talk kind of crazy, y'all just gonna have to follow. I mean, kind of, I know that's ableist, I'm supposed to say kind of wild. So just follow me for a second. But the problem is that it's not about Trump and who he put into office. They have been working for a long time, and they did not stop. So folks got Roe, and they saw that as a victory, and they got complacent. And they're like, ooh, we won. And meanwhile, we're like, this is not all we want. We want the freedom to be able to raise our children or not raise our children, right? Or not have children. We want a whole bunch of things. This is not what reproductive justice looks like to us. We got a whole bunch of things happening in our community that we need to take care of. And they were like, y'all should be happy. We got this law. It's the law of the land, we'll be fine. And that's how we got here, because just like everything else is these white women who are just Democrats. They're just Democrats. Okay. They want laws to pass, and they want presidents to be in place, right? And they want politics to happen, but they don't want freedom to happen. They're not looking for liberation.
That's right.
They're looking for laws and politics. So they're not movement builders. They're not building anything. They just want victories and check marks and to stand next to their husbands.
Oh.
I mean, y'all know it's true. Come on. Come on. Is we is or is we ain't? Like, come on. That's how we got here.
Yeah.
Because we, black women, were trying to build something and didn't really have allyship to do that. So with the power that we could collect, we were building grassroots things collectively in our communities,
Right.
and could only get but so far. And then we had other people who were trying to build something else, and they moved on. They got this, they checked the box, and they moved on. Meanwhile, the other white women were like, we got a trick for you. We're gonna keep building and building and building and building in our little Christian coalitions, and building and building, and we're gonna pull our kids out of school, we're gonna teach them here, and then we're gonna train them how to get on city councils, and then we're gonna move them up to this, and then they're gonna get in Senate, and then we're gonna wait and watch and wait and watch and wait and watch, and then finally they got an idiot to get into the presidency, and then that idiot, you see what I'm saying? It's been strategic for about 30, 40 years. Trump was just an aha. They're like, oh shit.
That's right.
We can just push a whole bunch of federal judges through. We can just push that was just they just lucked up on a moment. That's how we got here. It didn't start or end with Trump. They just lucked up, right? And so if they had have listened to us back then, we would have been strategized for the last 40 years beyond Roe, and had many more victories that were beyond a law. They would have been in community, they would have been in state, they would have been in all kind of places that are on just a federal law. And then we have something different now. That's the problem.
Okay. I want to pivot to Jahan, and similarly, once Jahan finishes, others feel free to chime in. So this month is the 30th anniversary of Parable of the Sower, a 1993 speculative fiction novel by feminist Octavia Butler, set in a post-apocalyptic Earth heavily affected by climate change and social inequality. Not unlike now. As we battle fascism, authoritarianism, transphobia, and patriarchal violence, we simultaneously face the threat of climate destruction. For example, Stop Cop City organizers thread the intersections of environmental racism and state violence. Tell us, Jahan, what Black feminist lessons should we take from Butler and the Atlanta organizers further into the 21st century?
Easy. No, I'm just kidding. How many of you have read Parable of the Sower or Parable of the Talents? Okay. Great. Me too. I love Octavia Butler. Well, first I want to introduce myself a little bit. Yat e she Jahan Giranya Nishya, Twitch ni Nishle, Dona Hitler Bashchin, Lashche Dashache Dona Hitler Dashanale, Tahotsoy Dat Nasha. So I'm Navajo and Black, Navajo on my mom's side, Black on my dad's side. I just introduced myself in my language because that tells my clans, that tells what my responsibilities are, and who I am. And also the Nahitle is a new term that us Black Navajo people are developing to represent us Black Navajo people and creating a new clan. So I just wanted you all to hear that. Yes, so I think there's lots of things we can pull out of Parable of the Sower. One is, God is change, right? The main thing. And so I think a major theme of that work that we can draw on is about change. and that change is inevitable, it is important, and so let's not be afraid of it, right? I think that's what we've been taught to do, is to be afraid of change, you know? Everybody, not just white people, you know, not just people who completely adhere to this system that's been imposed upon us, but everybody, you know? And so I think that's one of the most important things we have to unlearn, and that she teaches us through that book, is how to face our fears, right? And not hide in drugs and alcohol and all these other kind of things, because that's in the book too. I'm sorry, I don't want to get super into a book club, but you know, that's one of the things that happens in the books as well, is like people are kind of like, really been taken over by drugs because they just cannot deal with the impacts of what's happening to the world. I think she also tells us to step up, you know, stop being afraid and step up, to not just be a passive person that change happens to, but someone who's like, I'm going to be creative, I'm going to be strong-minded, I'm going to be resilient, I'm going to be adaptable, and I'm going to create the change in the best way that I can. So I think this is what she teaches us. And also the importance of community over the individual, I think, is an important part of it. We all like to think we can sustain ourselves by growing tomatoes in the backyard. No, we cannot. No, we cannot. You know, or like backyard gardens and things like, no, we cannot. You know, I used to be an executive director of an organization called Black Mesa Water Coalition in my homelands on Navajo Nation. And that's something that we experimented with around the food sovereignty. We grew food on 13 acres, and I mean, we live in the desert, so it's maybe not the same as the East Coast, but it is hard work, and you cannot do it by yourself. That's why we have clans. You know, and that's why we have these like traditional relationships, is so because we can't do things ourselves. And of course, this world has taught us that we can and that we should, right? I view everything that's happening now is this world is being destroyed. This world that's recent, right? And in the U.S., that's 500 years. That's it. You know, that's like maybe 5 lifetimes, because, you know, I've had, my grandparents lived in their early hundreds. So I'm like, that's just a few lifetimes, right? And we act like it's the truth of all life or something, you know. No, this is new, and everyone has always been saying it's unsustainable, and now it's collapsing. That's just what's gonna happen, because that's this world that we live in now. It cannot last. So it seems scary, but it's also, I just try to ask myself, isn't this what I want? Isn't this what I organized for? You know, to end patriarchy, to end capitalism, destruction of Mother Earth, pollution of waters, lands, and people, you know. And so I have to remind myself it's not gonna necessarily look pretty or be easy. And I think this is also something we can learn from that book. You know, we think of like, in the environmental justice or climate justice movement, we're given these images of like sunflowers and solar panels, and it's all just gonna be beautiful in a garden together. No, it's not. You know, those might be nice, I mean, that can be part of it, but we can't simply put up solar panels and act like we've changed the world or we're achieving some sort of justice for ourselves or for the environment. We can't do the same things and want the same things and call that justice, I don't think. I think there's something deeper that needs to be changed, and deeper ways that we need to change, that's about our values, our souls and our spirits, our connection to Mother Earth and the elements and to each other. Like, that's the thing that we need to reclaim and bring back. And hopefully before things get to the point of Parable of the Sower. I think that also is something that kind of irks me, is like a focus on like a futurism, not just Afrofuturism, indigenous futurism like this. I'm like, okay, but how about now? You know, like, let's not wait till everything's destroyed to make these changes, right? That, to me, that's a very Christian kind of framework and thinking, which I don't agree with as an indigenous person. So I think when we do that, when we change our connections, our relationships, that's going to bring us strength and bring us hope, you know. There's this, I think it was a t-shirt or something that said, we are not defending nature, we're nature defending herself. And I really believe in that. And I'm like, when can everybody feel like that? You know? Because, you know, and I've been taught by my elders and a lot of the indigenous, you know, wisdom keepers that I've had the privilege of meeting is the most important thing you can do is build your spiritual relationship to Mother Earth. It is not getting signatures. It is not doing protests or direct actions. Not to say that we shouldn't do those things, but the most important thing you can do is build and strengthen your spiritual relationship to Mother Earth. And I hold on to that very strongly, and I'm passing that on to you. I also noticed that in Parable of the Sower, there's no indigenous people in it. Right? and I'm like, I'd like to think that Octavia did that purposefully as like a commentary, but more likely, I don't really know, maybe she also just didn't think of us, or she thinks we're extinct, or we just exist in some sort of like historical lineage of people or something, but that's untrue. And I feel like something that I'm really excited about, being a Black and Indigenous person, and also that gives me hope, is what will happen when Black and Indigenous people do stuff together and stop being separate. Because we built this country as quote-unquote free labor and quote-unquote free resources by killing and taking over land. That's how America was built. Right. That's how much power we have. Right. So what if we took that power together and put it in a different direction? And I think that's something that Indigenous peoples, not all Indigenous people, right? I'm not saying every single Native person you meet is going to think this way. But I think in our traditions and in our cultures and people who adhere to that and our spirituality, there is a lot of tools and ways for that spiritual connection to be found and grown. And so I think that it's important for us to be together. Two statistics I quite often say is that globally, Indigenous people are 5% of the population, yet our lands hold 80% of the world's biodiversity. Wow. So another way is we are 40% better of taking care of the land than 95% of the world. Wow. And that's just by living our culture. Yeah. And the right to live our culture. That's all it is, you know? And here in the US and Canada, where Indigenous peoples are even less, I think it's 3.5% or somewhere around there of the population. Recently, we have been responsible for 25% of all emissions reductions in the US and Canada. And again, that's just from living our life ways and defending our life ways, right? So there's some power there too. And we're not gone. And even though we are a small population, we're very impactful in that way. So again, I think when we can learn to work together, create positivity and change and preparedness in that way, that's something that gets me excited. It makes me fearful, but also makes me excited, you know? And to me, that's the right place to be. I think got about a minute left. I think going back to the Stop Cop City campaign in Atlanta, I called someone earlier from the Indigenous Environmental Network. Her name's Jordan Harmon, and she's Muskogee. That's Muskogee land also. And I was like, so she's been there. And I was like, so what's up? Just trying to get some information from her. She told me a lot of pages of stuff that I can get into. But I really wanted to ask, so what's the Black and Indigenous relationship like in that campaign? Is it good? Is it bad? What's going on? And she said it's been, so far, mostly good. Let me try to find my notes here. Okay, yeah. So she said it's been mostly good. She got out there, Muskogee were all moved to Oklahoma, right? Even though that's their traditional homelands. And they ended up going out there because the folks there didn't have like a spiritual leader, or, I won't even say spiritual leader because that turns into some patriarchy stuff sometimes, but like someone who's trained enough to kind of lead that work there. So she ended up going there with someone, and she said it has, no matter what happens like with Cop City, it's been really like invigorating in terms of, it's been activating in terms of like rematriation of land, and the relationships, and it's kind of been forcing the relationships between Black and Indigenous people to really be talked about in that long memory way. Not just the who's got it worse thing that we see all the time, but in that long view. And she said, I think just maybe next week, they're bringing some of the Muskogee freedmen over. And then we got into a whole conversation about the freedmen. And so it's very interesting, but she's saying it's forcing real conversations And again, I think that's part of it. It's not just like, I'm right, you're wrong. You know, it's really digging in and talking about those things. And it's just giving me a lot of hope. Like you have.
Thank you, Jahan. And please, y'all, be thinking about your questions. We're going to open it up. We'll have time for a few questions before we wrap today. I do want to pass it over to Tia and on the divestment piece, we were just talking about Stop Cop City, and explore a little bit more there. So I mentioned earlier that the 2020 uprisings brought global attention to abolitionist and feminist arguments, such as defunding the police, abolishing patriarchal violence. And right now, there's a significant backlash from conservative, right-wing, centrist factions who are advancing this vast and dangerous attack that includes this persistent assault on Black studies, critical race theory, intersectionality, and queer studies. They're also deploying raids and arresting protesters and their allies. They're taking over the judiciary. They're forcing millions of people to carry unwanted pregnancies to term. And they're weaponizing trans kids because it mobilizes conservative voters. Tia, how can we understand the status of the feminist and the abolitionist movements during this time? And what should we be paying attention to, and what is our role in this moment of severe backlash?
So this question made me think back to like so many of the rooms that so many of us have been in. This is my first conference, right, post-COVID, and I'm really grateful to be in this space, a Black Feminist Future's designed space, right? And I think about the Netroots action. I think about being in the basement in Ferguson. I think about being in Brazil at the Black Feminisms Forum. I think about the questions that we wrestle with and grapple with, and then would go out and be on the front line, right, with the police. And then it makes me also think about the fact that the moment that we're in is both a moment of backlash and retrenchment against how effective the movement for Black liberation has been, and the galvanizing, not just in the United States, but globally around Black liberation, and, you know, kind of like galvanize around the phrase Black Lives Matter and movement for Black lives, and talking about human rights and not just civil rights. The moment that we're in right now is not only a backlash to that, but also a really strategic attack that's pushing at our intersections and the fights that we have been really hesitant to put to the forefront. So for those of us who were in the Ferguson basements, right, where we started being really real about how at this moment in this iteration of movement building, we're not gonna just platform a Black man who's around to be the leader and speak for us, right? And that we fought about it, and some people cried about it. One of the brothers from the contingent who came from Arizona was like, "Why are we talking about this stuff?" I said, "What do you mean stuff? What stuff do you mean?" And it was like, 'cause the stuff he was referring to was respecting people's pronouns, and, you know, being intentionally moving through a Black queer feminist lens. It's not an accident that now it's time to criminalize women's bodies and bodily autonomy and queer and trans folks, right? That's not, it is a very, very much purposeful, because when it was time for us all to march for Mike Brown, our queer and trans siblings was on the front lines with us. Where's the march? What are we doing? What's happening? Why are we entertaining a conversation like this isn't about that, right? Because when it was a little Black boy whose body was laid out in the street, we all fucking showed up. But now, when we're criminalizing and we're seeing Black mothers criminalized, our babies taken away from us, are forced to carry birth to term, right? And trans folks and gender non-conforming folks being criminalized, where's the pull up? Where's the ride out for Black Lives Matter then? It's not an accident that they're attacking us at the very intersection where we refuse to wrestle and grapple and move forward. This is not an accident, and we really need to understand, what does that say about ourselves, right? And what is it that we're willing to compromise on? Because when we started this conversation, Oriaku brought us back to our remembrance, right, about what compromises do to our movement and what compromises leave us open and vulnerable to. And I want to challenge us to remember that, not just in the movement building spaces. When we came up with the defund demand, right, people were like, this is dangerous. It is dangerous. It's supposed to be, right? Who was in the room when we were like, oh, well, if we're gonna have to confront the police, and people were like, I'm not confronting the police, right? But then we did it, and we opened up a new paradigm, and now we have another paradigm, and it's time for all of us to really understand that when we say all Black Lives Matter, it's not to be cute and it's not to put on a t-shirt. We need to be willing to go to the mat for all of us. And that means that we have to be willing to have those hard conversations, but also have those hard demands, those radical transformative demands as well, and not be satisfied when we pass a policy, because a lot of our work has been passing policies, and then policies ain't getting funded. I thought you told us that all we got to do was pass a law. Oh. The other thing I want us to remember and think about and understand is that the attacks like Dobbs, like the Supreme Court, like the attacks on CRT are happening because we're winning. And we're winning so well that there's a whole generation of people that will never be the same and who totally, literally do not think the same, right? About Black people, about white supremacy, about capitalism. They're never going to ever think the same. And they're trying to put the genie back in the bottle, but it's too late and it's impossible. And so as white supremacy, you know, is dying this slow death and trying to clutch, right, onto its power, we have to remember that we're so much more powerful than these pieces of paper that they're passing calling laws. Where we are, even though we, you know, yes, it was the abolitionist movement, we are more powerful than the bars that they're putting us behind. We are, and we have to know that and we have to remember that. The thing that I want us to pay a lot of attention to is how we, number one, how quickly and swiftly they attacked our democratic organizing platforms, okay? So Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, right, are owned by now right-wing capitalists who want to cooperate with the police, number one, open us up to surveillance, okay? And then also even though they're selling off these platforms and trying to neutralize the ways that we organize, and organize not just to organize, like literally movement organize, right? But also to shape hearts and minds and like tell our story on a global platform, right? From our cellular phones. The reason why they're attacking those things is because they think that they can stop us, but they cannot stop us, right? But that's what they're trying to do. And they think that by turning CNN and Twitter over into the hands of right-wingers, that they're gonna win this country back. But again, it's entirely too late, right? And the power is not in the cell phone, the power is within us. The power is not in the ability for us to tweet and the hashtag, it's in our words and it's in our ability to connect and galvanize. And we do have to find new ways and new resources, but I want to remind us that they're trying to control the airwaves, not because the power is in the airwaves, but because the power is in us. So what are the ways that we can tell our stories in new and different ways? What are the ways that we can seize the means of cultural production and build new ways of cultural production to tell our stories further, tell our stories wider and deeper, and continue to build power in those ways? And the organization that I work for now is called Build Power. So just a, a little bit of plug, but a little bit of a reminder that the power, our superpower, our renewable regenerative resource is our culture. It is in our indomitable spirit, right? It is in our ancestors who always knew that they were free. And we can tap into that and we can continue to grow and to build. And in order to do that, though, we need resources, we need infrastructure, we need investment, both on the policy side and on the hearts and minds and culture side. Chanel, shout out to Radcoms. A lifesaver, okay? And we also need to, not just to remember, but to remind ourselves continually and figure out how we can continue to build and to grow and not see, what they're telling us, right, is that we're losing, right, and that they're winning. But the fact of the matter is what this actually means is that we're the ones that are winning, and we're going to continue to. And we are going to continue to, though, because of the strength of the people who are in this room and that what it is that we actually represent, right? Which is that fight for our human rights, our love for one another and for our community and for our humanity and for our ability to tell new stories. And I want to stop with that, is that it's time for us to write the future. We got to point our new North Stars, and we have to set the vision that we're going towards. We can't look at the story that they're trying to tell us about the fact that we're losing. No, it's time for us to write a new story, and tell each other that story, right? Over and over and over again, and tell our kids and tell our siblings and go ahead and tell the news about it. Is that actually what all of this means is that we're winning. What you trying to instill fear in me because you afraid, right? And, I live in Arizona. There's a lot of the CRT attacks, and, they're firing Black school administrators just because, all of these things. And I said, well, what are y'all going to do about it? And they said, oh, well, people are afraid. And I said, well, afraid of what? Right? Like, I come from Black Western women who lived in the for real Wild West, and being afraid of white people, right, it's absolutely not an option if you want to keep your life. And it's time for us to write our new stories and our new narratives and the future it is that we all are fighting for. And I'll stop right there.
You want to go in on that?
I was going to respond, but I'm going to respond in my answer.
Okay, good. So I'm going to pivot to Tarana so we have enough time to get to your questions. And we also have a brief Afrofuturist video we're going to show at the end to hopefully leave you with something inspiring. Tarana, additionally inspiring. In addition to being an organizer for survivor justice and Black liberation, you co-launched a production house to produce stories that embrace complexity and highlight underrepresented voices. These works, incredibly important works, add to the canon of Black cinematic expression by telling the stories of those dedicated to challenging the status quo of power and privilege in the 21st century. In doing so, you're shaping narratives of Black people in America, narratives shape policies, and policies shape the material conditions of our lives. What feminist practices do you bring into your organizing and storytelling, and what do you hope these practices might yield?
Whew. First, I got to take a breath from that answer because I was about to jump out my seat. So yeah, I think a lot of folks don't know. You felt that? Okay, thing was shaking for a minute. In 2021, I started a production company with Merv. Y'all know Merv McConnell. And I was approached to start this. I've been approached to do a lot of things, and this was one that I jumped on because and when they approached me, they said, if we did this thing with you, what kind of stories do you want to tell? And I was like, Black. And they were like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And I was like, because I know they wanted me to tell like Me Too stories, and I was like, you have to know that if I do this, I'm not gonna tell a whole bunch of like Lifetime Me Too stories. This is not. We're not finna make like the Black burning bed and all of that. I'm not doing that. And so they were like, okay. And they said, well, what else you want to say? I was like, oh, I'm sorry, Black women. And like queer and Black. This is what I'm gonna do. And they said, how about this? We just want to work with you. Do what you want. And me and Merv were on a call, on a Zoom call, and he was texting me from the side. He was like, because the truth of the matter is most of people in that world don't actually know my history and don't know just how Black it is. And I was just like, okay. But yeah, I was really excited about it because I knew what we had cooking up. When I was 20-something, right after having about 25, I worked in Brooklyn for a nonprofit that did human rights work, and we shared space with Kitchen Table Press. Yeah, it's the most fortunate thing of my life. And Barbara Smith came in one day, and I know, this is crazy, right? I'm like 25, I gotta stop saying crazy. I'm trying, y'all. My daughter's on me about it, I'm trying. came in one day and I was about 25 and was packing up stuff and gave me a slew of books. And we were sitting there talking because I helped pack up the books. And we were sitting there talking, and she started talking to me about like just who I am, what did I do. She didn't know, you know. And because I volunteered to help. I didn't know who she was, by the way. Let me just know this. And but she was just hella cool, and she was talking to me, and she started talking to me about, I said, you know, I wanted to be a writer one day and all of this kind of stuff. And she was telling me about storytelling and why they started Kitchen Table Press and why it was so important. And at the time, I didn't think about making movies. I thought, I was like, I want to do this one day. I'm going to have a press like this, and I'm going to make books, and I'm going to have Black women books. And I always kept that in my mind about being the keeper of our stories, you know, being the keeper of the legacy of our stories. I also lived in Selma, Alabama, and curated stories for the National Voting Rights Museum, curated, you know, the stories of the movement. And so it's a part of the tradition of my work to be a keeper of our stories. I think it's very important to sort of what you were saying about, like, one of the things that I know is we have a history of winning. There's a legacy of winning in our history that we don't amplify enough. We amplify the big stuff, right? The Supreme Court case isn't a blah, blah, blah. But there is a daily, everyday, very regular sort of history of winning in our lives, right in our communities. When I think about Selma, for instance, when I think about the very everyday people, the teachers and folks' houses, whatever, who built that movement, that were winners, those were wins in a way that we don't maybe define winning nowadays, that we should get back to. I take that into me. Those are the practices. I think of that as feminist practice when I think about the work that I do and the way that I want to tell stories and the way that I want to pass on stories to young folks now. I remember meeting a young person who had been in, I think, Ferguson, who was talking about how we're finally fighting. And I was like, oh, poor baby. You know? And just, it also makes me think about why we have to pass on these stories and tell them, because there's also a whole, thinking about backlash, I'm trying to tie this to what you, because I was getting so excited about, I this all the time too, about the idea that we're winning. You know, I think that, I'm sort of getting off your answer. I'm trying to tie it together, but I can't. But one of the things that really, you know, folks poo-poo the idea of hope all the time, and we really, really shouldn't, because that's really what's keeping us going, right? I don't want to, I'm trying not to repeat exactly, but I do talk about this all the time about how we are winning, and we really, it's the thing that fuels me constantly, because I think that we don't recognize that why it's so bad right now, why it feels so bad right now, is because these folks are losing. It's exactly what happens. When you are dying and when you are losing, you fight the hardest. They are dying. And they knew 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that this moment was going to come. That's why they was planning about Roe and all of that. That's why they knew. That's why they were plotting and planning to get their kids to be senators and they knew. They saw the writing on the wall. They knew it was going to keep getting more brown, and it was going to keep getting more queer, right? I swear, anybody who has seen me speak in the last, in every speech to say it's going to keep, your kids are going to be brown and wrapped in rainbows, ain't shit you could do about it. It's true. Their children are going to be brown and wrapped in rainbows, and ain't shit they could do about it, and they know it. And that's why they fighting like that. We actually are winning, but we got to hold the line, which means we do have to keep telling more stories. We do have to keep infusing this narrative into the veins of our folks so they understand it, because it feels so bad right now. it doesn't feel like, this doesn't feel like a win, but part of it is because with the way we define wins, with these policies and all the rest of that, if we keep defining wins like that, it's gonna feel like we're losing. But if we tell the stories of our folks, what looked like in our communities then they'll understand winning differently. Winning on the ground is different, which is why I wanted to organize around sexual violence differently, because it's hard to organize around sexual violence in the federal courts. You can't. What law are you going to pass? Look at New York. You had a governor who was signing laws into policy with one hand and running his hand down the back with the other. How you going to win that way? It's the truth. So you can't really win that way, motherfucker. Your ally, he's feeling up on your leg. That's not a win. Losing my lion. Okay. Come on. This is what I'm saying. So if we keep defining wins only in this finite way, then we are going to feel like losers all the time. People don't want to get up and lose. But about my production company. No, I think that we want to bring stories that inspire people in ways. I mean, we have a lot of black TV now. We have a lot of black stuff on TV, but it still doesn't feel. Look, I'll be 50 this year, and I feel like I had to get that in there. I'll be 50 this year, and I like my number. I mean, not all the time, not when my hips hurt, but I think that when I look at television and I see black women, when they portray 45 and older, somehow it doesn't feel like what me and my homegirls look like and act like. I'm like, it took me a long time to have some change and to dress fly and to travel, and I see 45 and 50-year-old women on TV, and it's all of this other bullshit that's like, I'm still getting it in and like living life. So I want to see that. I want to see black women that reflect who I am and what I look like, and you know what I mean? So that's what we want to make. I also have a child who has 1,000 labels in their life, and I want all them labels on television, you know? Like my child said to me, wow, the queer people on TV are hot to trot now, you know, or like overly sexualized. Like every time there's a black queer character, it's the one that's hopping all the bed and everything and not whatever. So we want to make those kind of stories and like talk about the full lives, the material lives of the people that we see every day. Yes. And I think we need that too.
100%. Give it up, y'all. All right, we've got time for maybe one or two questions. Thank you to those of you who submitted. So I'm going to combine a couple of these because they're around the same theme, which is how important is imagination? And we talked about this. And we talk about radical imagination in our practice and our practices. How important is imagination in shaping the world we want? And then I'm going to combine that with if you can answer what is one thing that's giving you hope. So let's get, if each of you could contribute to that, and then we'll kind of wrap up on that and close it out. Tia, do you want to start?
Imagination is so important because what we're talking about, you know, the reality versus what we understand, right, about us, ourselves. To be free in our imagination would be to be truly free. And there's, you know, this bell hooks. And Toni Morrison talk about how if we have to be able to get free in our dreams, right? Even our dreams were colonized, even in our understanding of what's possible, right? We are thinking in such a limited context because of the conditions that we're in. But the ability to dream, the ability to imagine, and the ability to take control, because everything that we see around us was at first somebody's idea. And if we can understand that, right, then we can understand the power that our imaginations have, that we can literally create the world around us starting up here, starting in our dreams, our imagination, in our fantasies, right? We can then shape the outer world around us. That's how powerful they are. It is not a frivolous thing to dream. It's not a frivolous thing to create and write poetry and stories and songs, right? When the music plays, right, it makes your body move because that's how powerful music is. And I believe that the daily practice, right, of exercising our imagination needs to be just as much of movement building as our politic and our readings. And the thing that gives me hope is that I believe that culture is our superpower. Every time I have the opportunity to engage in a space with music, with food, with comedy, and, you know, through that laughter or through that dancing or through that, you know, having a good meal and you know, talking. Everybody, you ever had a meal so good where you start talking about other good stuff that you ate? Like, like the space that is created when we are enjoying, right, our culture, or like having a catharsis because something touched and moved and inspired us. Those are the times and the spaces that give me hope because it sparks in me, right, the possibility. And when I understand what's possible, right, I can become even more free.
Thank you. Oriaka?
So, imagination. I used to think like, oh, I live in the land of lofty expectations and I'm in my head and all, but it's grounded in truth. Like, imagination is, I mean, as you were saying, it's like the things that we're experiencing now were ideas that other people had, you know? There's some things that I'm like, oh, it's a novel idea, but the reality is some things it's like, I feel like in dreaming and imagining, it's that opportunity to be reminded of what is possible, you know? And so taking time to imagine, taking time to just give ourselves space to just pause and breathe and be in the current moment that we're in and dream of a future where, you know, it doesn't matter where your zip code is or your indigeneity or what you make, or none of these things matter because you're just able to be free. That is why I am always in my imagination all the time, because I'm like, this is not it. There's so much more, and I see it and I feel it every day. There are things that give me hope. I mean, shout out to the abortion funders that are here in this room. Yes. The abortion funds give me hope every day. When we're thinking about the legal and political climate that we're in, when we're thinking about the years and decades of oppression, or reproductive oppression even, that we have experienced, and in spite of all those things, abortion funders will be like, what do you need? Where are you trying to go? Do you need to eat? Do you need help paying for your abortion? Do you need a ride? Do you need someone to talk to? You need some pills. Whatever that is, like, people are coming through, you know, and this is from that spirit of mutual aid. This is from a legacy of our people doing this and imagining that, you know, there's something more to this world. So, yeah, as the homie Kwajalein always says, you know, like, find the times to tap into your radical imagination. This, like, we have to, you know? And if we don't think we're going to win, what the hell are we doing? Like, I play to win, so, yeah, this is not it.
There's my pen. I think imagination is very important. I'm a painter too, and maybe I didn't mention that earlier, but I really started painting in the past several years because one, I survived cancer, and two, I was burnt out from the movement. And so that saved me, you know, to be able to start painting and creating art. It just helped me to just be, instead of like, oh, back here, over there, I gotta figure, you know, it helped me just be right there. And that has given me strength and hope, because just running around in the movement doesn't give me strength and hope. It made me weak, you know, and it made me jaded. You know, so I mean, that's the importance of imagination and creativity. And I think also that it allows me to say things that I cannot say with words, and it allows people to have conversations about things when words get in the way, right? And I think that that's so important now. The nuances that are needed to build the movement, it needs to get beyond that define, categorize, and rank thinking. That's the way we've been trained to think through colonization and through using the English language. It's nouns, right? Chair, mic, you know, man, woman, right? That kind of stuff. And so again, just, you know, I was thinking about, and I'm not fluent in my language or anything, but just the difference in my own language, again, talks about those relationships. Isn't the chair is this thing like, oh, when you need some rest, it can give you some rest. You know what I mean? So I think it's just to realize we need to unlearn that, right? That our thinking has become so limited. That's why we need imagination as well. Thank you.
Bring us home, Toronto.
Take us home. I was thinking of such a personal, personal answer. You know, this is super personal for a second, but I had a stroke in 2020. I know, it's always so shocking to hear that, but I did. I had a stroke in 2020, and it changed everything for me. Because as much as, and I probably have answered questions similar to this over my career, you know, things like what brings you joy, or how do you rest, or how do you imagine, and I realized that things like imagination are a privilege, right? So even when we talk about them, it's always sort of connected back to work, right? I want the freedom to imagine so that I can imagine something that I can bring to life. And what I have been practicing, not really mastering, is trying to have the freedom to imagine nothing. I just want for us, for myself and for all of us, the space and the privilege to just imagine and not make it anything, right? I just want to like imagine foolishness floating in the air above my garden, you know? Imagine myself being in Mahogany with Diana Ross, you know? Like, I really want big freedom, a type of imagination that is not connected to bringing a project to work, or something that is connected to more work, because we work so much. And I get it. I know we have to imagine something before we make it happen, but we do that, right? We really do that. I am really trying to figure out how to commit myself to a type of imagination that allows me actual freedom. And I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I know as much as I love y'all, because I do love y'all, and I love the movement, and I love being Black, I also love being alive. Yes. And I want us all to be alive more than anything, because like really what we fighting for, liberation, to be alive. We want to be free so we can live. So when I think of imagination, I think ultimately I just want to live. And to be like, I think really that's what this whole song is trying to get to, is like, y'all really just want to be left alone so we can like live and be free. So that's what imagination is for me. It's like a goal where I can just like, maybe I want to paint, but like something, just a flower that I could look at. I don't even want to frame it. I just want to like paint it and just look at it. And that is what gives me hope, that I can just do that one day. Want to work.
What gives me hope are these amazing panelists and everybody in this room. And also Black feminisms, from defunding the police to tackling the climate crisis to ending the scourge of sexual violence and forced birth. Black feminisms provide tools to confront and interrupt violence and oppression. Black feminisms connects the dots, making it more possible for us to be our whole selves and leave no one behind. For Black trans and cis women, for gender nonconforming people, for trans and intersex folks, for people with disabilities, and so many others, Black feminisms are life-affirming and life-saving. We must center Black, queer, and trans feminist perspectives because all violence is intersectional. White supremacy cannot be separated from patriarchal violence. Everyone will be free when we build a world where Black women and non-binary people are free. Thank you so much to our incredible panelists for their insightful thinking, to the Black Feminist Future team for organizing this beautiful experience. And we're going to close out with a brief Afrofuturist short from the team at the Movement for Black Lives.
We anticipated your brilliance and broke what chains that we could to build the world that you deserve. Tell me, do they teach a freedom summer in the year of 2020?
Brianna, Titi, we lost so many that summer. So much strange fruit.
The pandemics of COVID-19 and police brutality.
Something broke open in us. I don't have any words. Our people, we rose up everywhere. Every city, every night. We fought for you, for your freedom. I'll never forget those nights, those streets. 26 million strong.
26 million strong. The empire trembled, and suddenly there were cracks. Confederate flags banned. Public safety reimagined.
And get cops out of schools.
Workers striking in defense of Black lives.
We will say her name.
The WNBA, then the NBA. Game after game canceled. Dangerous electeds voted out of office. We tore down the statues of our oppressors. Our people began to dream and fight for a world without policing, a world free of the brutal grind of capitalism.
I am somebody. And I deserve.
We carried our people to office.
With our fists in the air.
When cities started passing reparations bills, we wrote our own laws. And you are our wildest, freest dreams. We flooded the streets for you, for your health.
For your wealth. We spoke your liberation into being, into law, into land.
Child, if our work is not done, if you do not awaken every morning into Black power and Black love, then you must make your liberation whole. We are with you, and we know that you will win. Remember how we fought for you in the summer of 2020 and take back the power.
You were our mandate.
We have a mandate. And damn it, we gon' do it. Call and response. The mandate for Black people in this time. To avenge the suffering of our ancestors. To earn the respect of future generations. And be willing to be transformed.